Hi, I want to look at a game today from former world champion Mikhail Tal. This is from the Munich Olympiad 1958 versus a player named Milev. Now, in 1958, Tal was at the peak of his powers. He would go on to win the championship in 1960 against Botvinnik, and for a period of about 3 years, from probably 1957 to 1960, that was what we could say Tao's peak years. He was nearly unstoppable at that time, and he played his most consistent and best chess during that time. Of course, afterwards, all the way to the end of his life, he continued to uh, play brilliancies, but it was more in flashes than anything. From 56, 57 to about 1960, it was consistent. I mean, he was definitely a meteor flashing through the sky, like a comet. He was very strong player, and as well as it's well known, his health, you know, um, gave him problems throughout his entire life, and it affected his play. But here, 1958, he's young and good, and he played c4, c5, symmetrical English, knight c3, knight c6, knight f3, knight f6, e3, e6, and we see it's super symmetrical, d4, d5, and finally c takes d5, and black breaks the symmetry with knight takes d5, not wanting to take on that isolated pawn structure after e takes d5. So bishop c4. So now Tal is, giving uh, black the option to play knight takes c3, which would strengthen his center, or accept an isolated pawn after knight takes d5. So instead of that, he decided to play knight b6, which is a typical move you might see in Alekhine defense. Um, Here, it may not be too necessary. Let's look at the alternative: c takes d5, e takes d5, and followed bishop e7, and then black with castle, and then it's white with the isolated queen's pawn, and which is not necessarily bad. This is the type of position that a player like Tao would like, with open files and ranks and diagonals, etc. But anyway, so Milev played knight b6. So bishop b5. This is a good move because knight e5 is a threat that already has to be thought about here. Okay, let's continue. So a6. So we see that Milev wants to break the pin, and the only thing about that is he's kind of like not, he's neglecting his development. You could kind of see where this game is going here. So he plays a6, and Tao just whips off the knight. Bishop takes c6, check. B takes c6, and castles. And you can see that in exchange for the bishop here, white has a better pawn structure and a lead in development. Okay, bishop b7 was played. And of course, this move anticipates knight e5 coming to attack the c pawn. The only thing is about that move is that he probably should have tried to get his king side developed. Maybe by just taking here, c takes d4, e takes d4, bishop e7, and when the pawn is actually attacked with knight e5, then play bishop e7. Okay, play could continue after that. Queen h5 perhaps, with threatening mate. Castle, rook d1, and with the idea of bringing this rook to d3 and then over with some type of attacking chances on the king side. Uh, this move doesn't really work after this castle, knight takes c6, and then bishop f6. And black has compensation for the pawn. And then the next move coming up is going to be rook fc8, and black is okay there. Instead, back to the game, bishop b7 was played. And now Tal comes up with a good idea. Now remember, when you have a lead in development, you want to try to open the position. This is the way that you can exploit, manifest the lead in development. If the position stays closed, then eventually the opponent can hide behind the closed nature of the position and then gradually catch up, and then the lead in development vanishes. So one of the things you want to do is you want to have an open fight when you have a lead in development. And this next move by Tal facilitates that aim. So knight e4. Why knight e4? Well, Tal is attacking the c pawn, and he wants to provoke black into capturing, right, in order not to lose the pawn, capturing, but in turn, after he captures here, then this pawn, the e pawn, captures on d4, and now the c1 h6 diagonal is open up for the dark square bishop on c1, as well as the e file for white's rook. So this is the idea that the players revolve around for the next couple of moves. Now, Milev wants to keep the position closed, so he plays knight d7. However, he's not developing. He's moving the same pieces around. Now, let's look at c takes d4. After c takes d4, e takes d4, bishop e7, bishop g5, wanting to trade the dark square bishop off. Let's note, if this bishop is gone, this knight has good access, free access to c5. So f6, causing a slight weakness on the king side. Bishop e3, and knight d5, and rook c1, with the idea of following up with knight c5. White is better, but black can still try to fight on. So after knight d7, again trying to keep everything locked up, Tal plays queen c2, and the idea is the same, just putting more pressure on this pawn and trying to get black to open up the position. So he says nope, and he plays queen b6. So it seems that black has won this little battle here as far as keeping the position closed. So what can Tal do here? Okay, well, notice that this knight here is only protected by the king. So after knight e5, this move right here. Alright, so after knight e5, this is a strong blow, and it's either going to win the battle of c5 or forces black's king to stay in the center. So black's position is starting to look pretty rickety. So now Black chooses to play c takes d5, so he finally gives in here. But his position is actually worse than before. Now, the reason why he did c takes d4 this time is because after knight takes e5, d takes e5, then white's plan is real simple because look at the double pawns on the c file. So the plan is going to be to attack this this pawn duel by playing b3 and bishop a3 with the attack on the c pawn, and then just rook ac1. And black is strategically lost now because there's no way that he can defend those pawns adequately. So he gives it up. C takes d4. But now Tal can throw in this in-between move, knight takes d7, which causes black to forfeit castling, of course. King takes d7. And now, there it is. E takes d4. That's what Tal wanted in the first place. And now you got the open e file, or semi-open e file rather, and you have the diagonal c1 to h6 open for the dark square bishop. So that's fantastic. Now, some of you try to get fancy and want to pin the pawn, right? Do an in-between move here. But after rook d1, rook d8, rook takes d4, king c8, black is still, hanging around, still alive here. This move, e takes d4, is more to the point. Now, black played king e8. And the idea of king e8 is to castle manually by playing f7 to f6 and then king f7. Another idea that was possible was rook d8 with the same idea of some type of artificial castling on the queen side. Rook d8, bishop e3 can be played, right, gaining time against the queen on b6 due to the opposition, the pieces. Queen c7, queen d2, king c8, bishop f4, harassing the queen again, queen b6, and rook f d1 with these ideas of rook c1, c3, and b3, and also bishop g3, followed by queen f4, creating this battery, threatening mate. So instead, king e8. Tal played bishop e3, developing with time. Again, the ideas of d5. And remember that all the time, the idea of opposing important pieces of your opponent. So now, black has to waste a move, retreating the queen. So queen c7. And again, this is about exploiting the lead in development. d5. Notice that the c pawn cannot capture because the queen on c7 is not protected at all. So e takes d5. Now what? Do we move the knight to c5? That looks like a good move. Tal played rook fe1. Said go ahead, take the piece. Black played king d8, showing good tactical vision. Because after d takes e4, queen takes e4, bishop e7, bishop c5, all of a sudden we have three pieces raining down on e7. And black wishes he can castle. Okay, maybe that wasn't strong enough. D takes e4, queen takes e4, check. What about queen e7? Well, then just queen c4. Again, note the opposition with this rook and the queen. And that is going to be fatal for black. Another idea was to try to get away with bishop e7, but then Tal has a wonderful move here, knight d6, and if queen takes d6, then bishop c5. Note the pin on the bishop on e7 is what makes this combination possible. So instead of queen d6, king f8 here, knight f5, again with these shadow tactics of double attack threats on the bishop on e7. So bishop f6, bishop c5, king g8, rook e7, followed by rook a e1. Note that that bishop, note that that bishop cannot capture the rook on e7, because after knight takes e7 check, then the queen will be lost. All right, so let's go back. So all of those variations show you that black is in deep trouble here. So king d8. Tal played queen b3. Milev played c5. And of course Tal played knight takes c5, continuing the theme of opening the position. And after bishop takes c5, queen takes c5, queen takes b7, and Milev resigned because rook c8, rook a d1 is totally hopeless. Let's go back here. Instead of c5, if king c8, bishop b6, queen d7, knight c5. Notice the exploitation of those weak dark squares. Bishop takes c5, bishop takes c5, rook e8, rook takes, queen takes, and queen c3. And the idea is just to simply play rook e1, dominating the e-file. Again, white is totally winning. Here, again, f takes e4 is just simply meant by, can you guess the move? Look at the queen in king's position. Just bishop b6. So if you were thinking that move, that's wrong. So this is what Tal was threatening immediately with queen b3, was bishop to b6. And so in an effort to deal with it, c5 was tried, and of course Tal just broke through with these sacrifices, and Milev resigned. So once again, that was a fantastic game. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Please like and subscribe, comment, and tell your friends in the chess clubs all across the world. All right. So I hope that you learned from that. Make sure you develop your pieces and don't move the same pieces around 2 and 3 times. I don't care how experienced you think you are. Like I say, you see strong masters and grandmasters collapsing in these positions. And these are short games too. This game was 22 moves. You know, experienced players just making real basic errors. So make sure you don't do. Make sure if you lose, you lose in the end game. Don't lose this early in the game, because you don't want to. Some of you are driving real far to these tournaments, right? You're driving a long time to the tournament. You're renting a hotel room, to stay in the tournament. 2-3 days. You don't want to lose in 22 moves. You've been reading books all night and studying and watching videos and studying King's Indian defense all night only to sit down and the opponent plays the Trompowski against you or something. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed the game, and I will see you guys in the next video.